Okay.
So it's right there. I guess like right there it got.
So we're not doing it.
We are doing it.
We are doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Okay. But the words are in the prayer book, right?
344, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Great. Sure. Here come a huge crew of
this
family.
Is tomorrow morning. And here's for tonight. I got it. We're good.
And I added some poetry for tomorrow morning after
saw.
she printed that, but
Yeah. No, she didn't.
oh,
I think she stuck it in.
that's for tonight.
Yes. This Splendor's for tonight.
Splendors for tonight. I think
Is there another one for tonight?
yes, there's one at the cottage reading.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
And then I think I'm going to use the same cottage reading tomorrow because I really like it.
Okay. Great.
It's fun.
Isn't it fun when you really? I mean, like when you really like something, it really speaks to you. Just to put it
found
out there
this
as much
poem-
as possible.
I found this poem that is not really related to prayer, but I like so much that I think we're going to read it tomorrow morning just because I like it.
Okay.
So
Very cool.
I have this whole spiel, which I've done for the Saturday morning people, about how poetry helps open up a different way of understanding prayer. So.
Well, I mean, and technically PUT were poetry, and they're now part of prayer. So, I mean, not as much on Shabbat as on Chagim and whatnot, but it's still there. It's still part of our tradition.
Great. Well, and Lachadodi is a great example.
Sure.
I think that we should begin.
Okay.
Okay. Alex?
How wonderful it is that we're all here together. Hine Matov.
Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. 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 Join us. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
I am loving this room tonight because it feels like a joyous reunion. And every time we come here, it should feel like a joyous reunion. It should feel like we are seeing family and family by choice. It should feel like we are coming home. And to the extent that all the extra hugs tonight are making it feel like a joyous reunion, I am into it. We are here to honor and celebrate and acknowledge the whole range of human emotions and experience. We are here for those of you who have joys to share. We are here to celebrate with the Hours and Liao family for the amazing thing that is going to happen starting tonight and especially tomorrow morning as Serena and Trudy become bat mitzvah, benot mitzvah. And we are here to acknowledge that some of us enter this room with heavy hearts. Some of us enter this room remembering loved ones we have lost recently, remembering loved ones we have lost in years past, with pain, with brokenness, and we are here to hold that too. And hopefully in the homecoming that is arriving in this space, there is room enough for all of that. In order to make that happen, the first thing that we need to do is turn off our cell phones and pagers and anything that rings, jingles, and buzzes. I promise you, the people you need to reach out to are already in this room. And we are going to invite up Serena and Trudy and their parents to lead us in the lighting of candles, which can be found on page 3 and 2.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us.
As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
The source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives.
Together, bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu le'adlik ner, le'adlik ner, shall Having welcomed all of you and begun to welcome Shabbat, it is also my honor to welcome Cantor Francine Davis-Jacobs, who is leading us in worship tonight, along with our accompanist, Alex Navarro. And we are going to continue our sort of warm-up music as we really get into the Shabbat spirit by turning to page 344 for Shir Chadash, 344. Shiru Adonai Kol Haaretz, Shiru Adonai Shir Chadash. Shiru Adonai Kol Haaretz. To God, all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God, and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru Adonai Kol Haaretz, Shiru L'Adonai Shir Chadash. are going to continue by welcoming the Sabbath bride with the words of Lecha Dodi, which are found on pages 20 and 21. We are going to sing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, because those are my favorites. And when we get to the 9th verse, we are going to rise and turn and face the back door. That's the moment, the Kabbalists say, when Sabbath officially enters our space and enters our lives. So we're going to rise, turn, face the back door as we welcome the Sabbath bride in the 9th verse. Please turn to page 20 for Lecha Dodi. We're seated until then. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela la la la. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Ishmi'anu el hameyuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, V'shem u'tiferet v'niti la la la. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Verse 2. Likrat Shabbat, lechu v'nelcha, ki mikor haberacha, mirosh mikedem nisucha, sof ma'aseh b'mashavat chila la la. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Hitoreri, kiva orech kumi uri shir daberi, kivod Adonai alach nigila la la. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha uv'tzohala, toch emunei am segula. Boi kala, boi kala. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela la la. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. While we are still standing, we're going to take a moment in just a second to greet each other. I want to give you 2 challenges. One is that to find someone you don't know and introduce yourself, maybe even greet them like this is a reunion with an old friend, even though you don't know them yet. And 2 is when you hear the piano, that's our cue to turn to page 28 for Baruch Hu. Shabbat shalom. Wait for the cue. There are all these invitations here for the professional event.
Oh, yeah.
It's awesome.
It's great. I know some of them.
I'm like intrigued. It's really nice to
This
have.
is the one that's like the murder mystery.
Yes.
I'm intrigued by how that's going to go down.
I I was like, it is a murder mystery.
Right.
Murder in Shabbat, not
Right. Shabbat, happy, notorious.
I think we just called it Shabbat mystery then, which sounds like mystery meat.
Right. It sounds like we're having what they serve at camp.
Page 28 for Baruch Hu as we remain standing. Page 28. Yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai. Dai 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 dai. Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam vaed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam vaed. Yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai. The next prayer is the Ma'ariv Aravim prayer. We're going to remain standing. It was a test. The next prayer is the Ma'ariv Aravim prayer, which is found on page 30. And it is a prayer about trying to appreciate splendor. It is a prayer about trying to be aware of the fact that the sun, the earth is constantly going around the sun. The earth is constantly spinning on its axis. The sun is constantly rising and setting. And if we don't take note of it, if we don't take note of that splendorous moment, we might miss it. So I wanted to share with you this evening as our Ma'ariv Aravim a poem called Splendor by Thomas Centolella, which gets at, I think, that experience of trying to find a little bit of splendor every day. One day it's the clouds. One day it's the mountains. One day it's the latest bloom of roses, the pure monochromes, the dazzling hybrids, inspiration for the cathedral's round windows. Every now and then there's splendor of thought, the singular idea and its brilliant retinue, word, cadence, point of view, little gold arrows flitting between the lines. And two, the splendor of no thought at all, hands lying calmly in the lap or swinging a 6-iron with effortless tempo. More often than not, splendor is the star we orbit without a second thought, especially as it arrives and departs. One day it's the bluest glassy bay, one day the night and its array of jewels visible and invisible. Sometimes it's the warm clarity of a face that finds your face and doesn't turn away. Sometimes a kindness unexpected that will radiate further than you might imagine. One day it's the entire day itself, each hour forgoing its number and name, its cumbersome clothes, a day that says, come as you are, large enough for fear and doubt, with room to spare the most secret wish, the deepest, the darkest, turned inside out. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. Join me in the middle of page 33. Actually, join us on page 32, because we're going to sing it.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, join us on page 32, and we'll sing it, even better. Avat olam. Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Amcha ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, u'kimu mishpatim, otanu limadita, otanu limadita. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochbeinu, u'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha, v'nizmach b'divrei Toratecha, u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed, ki hem chayenu. Ve'orech yameinu, uvahem negei yomam v'layla, negei yomam v'layla. Ve'ahavatcha al tasir, imenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Ohev amo Yisrael. Page 34. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. You may be seated as we invite up Trudy to lead us in the Ve'ahavta on page 36.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levacha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha hadvarim ha'el asher anohi mitzabecha hayom alevavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibartam bam v'shiktecha bebatecha uvlektecha v'derech v'shokbecha uvkumecha uvshartam leot aliadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha uktartam al mizuzot betecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitim kedoshim le'elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim l'chil lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem.
Join me at the top of page 39. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Micha Mocha on page 40. Kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot, osei feleh, Nora tehilot, osei feleh, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Malchutecha u'manecha, bokei hayam livnei Moshe u'Miriam, Ze'elianu ve'amru, Ze'elianu ve'amru, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot, osei feleh, Nora tehilot, osei feleh, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. We continue with our blessing for God's protective presence in the evening, Hashkivenu, on page 42.
Hashkivenu Adonai,
Eloheinu l'shalom, V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Ushmor tzeiteinu, uvoeinu, l'chaim u'shalom, me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. We turn now to page 46, where the Amidah begins, and we invite up Serena to lead us as we rise.
Adonai, שפתך תפתח ופיה היא תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor HaNara, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim, Vekonei HaKol, Vezocher HaSteavot V'Imot, Umivi Geula Livnei V'Nehem, L'man Shemo B'Ahava. Melech Oser Umoshia Umakin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Bezrat Sarah. Atah Kibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Le'Ushia, Morid Hatah, Mechalchel Hayim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofech Olim, Umatzir Asurim, Umekaye Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Kivirot, Umido Me'alah, Melech Memit, Umechaye, Umatzmiah Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hakol. Atah kadosh, Yishimcha kadosh, Ukedoshim b'chol yom lahalalu hasela, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el hakadosh.
You may be seated. Pray with me at the top of page 55. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. We continue now, Shalom Rav, on page 60. Page 60. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol Shalom, ki atahu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam Tasim Leolam Tasim Leolam. We take a few moments now for silent prayer. If you can't think of anything to say, make a list of 5 things you're grateful for today. I promise it will change your life. Ratzon Imrefi Vehegyoni Bi Lefanecha Adonai Tzuri Adonai We turn our prayers now to those in our lives and in the life of our community who are in need of healing, who are in need of strength, who are in need of a refuah shlema, a return to wholeness. We are thinking of those in our lives dealing with illness, those in our lives dealing with chronic pain, those in our lives dealing with addiction and in recovery. In our community, we are praying this week for Barbara Berkowitz, Marty Berman, Marcia Block, Bradley Borden, James Brummett, Melba Berman, Richard Dana, Jeffrey Feinstein, Alan Garber, Boris Grinman, Sarah James, Beverly Kovnat, Lawrence Levy, Michael Marcoux, Sharon Martin, Rachel McBride, Ryan Michael Russo, Roger Williams, Thad Zaremba, Ari Theodore Zeitman, Yisrael Moshe ben Ruta Masha, and Chenya Rachel Mindel bat Aaron Vitzipora. Our prayer for healing, Misha Berach, is found on page 253. Misha Berach, Ahavoteinu, Mekor HaBracha, Ve'ayimoteinu, may the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Yishe Be'era Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. A few brief announcements on this Shabbat. If you had a chance to pick up our Shabbat handout, everything I'm about to tell you is there in greater detail. First, we hope you'll stay with us through the end of services so we can say Kiddush and Motzi together, and we are grateful to Serena and Trudy's families for sponsoring this week's wine and challah in honor of their daughter's Benot Mitzvah. I would call your attention to a couple of upcoming events. If you are or know a college student or alumni of Emmanuel who is college age, we are having our annual reunion dinner this Sunday evening at 6:30 p.m. at Mia's table, so please make sure they know about it because we would love to buy them dinner. We hope you will join us next Friday for our Heritage Shabbat and Birthday Bash services, which will feature all the diverse musical styles of the 75 years of Emmanuel's history. Will begin at 6 p.m. with a big bash to follow. There are food stations. There's all sorts of things are happening for people of all ages. We also have Tot Shabbat that evening for those folks with young children. We hope you will join us for a wonderful celebration. On behalf of our congregation, we want to welcome the young professionals joining us for the Yad Shabbat dinner and program. I hope you will join me after services in the boardroom for our food and festivities. And lastly, our Shavuot evening service led by our confirmands will take place on Saturday, June 8th at 7 p.m. That is our community's Shavuot experience. It is not only for the families of confirmation. We invite you please to come. And our Shavuot festival service, including Yisker, follows on Sunday, June 9th at 10:30 a.m. I didn't grow up in the South. I grew up in Colorado, a state that defies regional description. Not the Midwest, not fully the West, just Colorado, the middle. But living in Houston is not my first sojourn into the South. In rabbinical school, I had a student pulpit in High Point, North Carolina. Once a month, I would travel there to spend Shabbat. Living in New York at the time, I was ready for the change of pace. It was great to get out of the relentless hustle of the city. People moved a little slower. People talked a lot slower. People were, nice. If you have heard of High Point, it is probably because it was once the furniture capital of the world. It was also the hosiery capital of the world, but somehow that name was less sticky. So in the middle of town, there is a sculpture, a 3-story bedroom dresser with gigantic socks hanging out of the drawer, a strange but fitting testament to the industries that made the town thrive. It was the centerpiece of my driving tour with one of the congregants' leaders on my first visit to High Point. It came into view as we turned a corner, and I was speechless. Some towns have giant balls of twine. High Point has a giant chest of drawers. On the same tour, Howard, my guide, showed me the once sprawling metropolis. Most of the buildings now stand empty. Furniture and hosiery production has moved overseas. But there is a small and growing college there. The city is down but not out. As we were driving through the neighborhoods, he kept pointing out to me private schools, one after another. It felt like there were a lot of them, and so I asked him about it. "Sure," said Howard in his slow southern drawl. "There are tons of private schools here and all across the South. These are the schools white families set up to avoid desegregation." He told me these schools are still going strong, how High Point is still very much a divided community. Suddenly, a different South started to emerge, not just the South of quaint accents and oversized dressers, but the South of complex stories and ongoing tensions. This was when my recently acquired Yankee judgment kicked in. In some parts of the country, segregation had ended, but in the South, they had fought to maintain it long after Brown versus the Board of Education and the Civil Rights Act. As a Coloradoan, I felt pretty high and mighty driving through that High Point neighborhood. It was only later that I realized that the story of school segregation was my own story too, even in Colorado. I went to Cherry Creek High School, along one of the best public schools in the state. It is in a wealthy, suburban, high-achieving community. We were once voted second snootiest school in the country by David Letterman, and someone supposedly called to ask if we could buy first. And we are big. My graduating class was over 900 students, and of them, 11 were African American. I graduated from high school in 2003. I didn't go to private school, but for all intents and purposes, I did go to a segregated school. This past Wednesday, Emmanuel hosted an event celebrating the 65th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. I saw many of you there, and those who were can attest that it was an inspiring evening, but it was not uplifting. Over and over, our speakers stressed that our schools are more segregated than they have been in decades. After Brown, segregation no longer takes the form of public schools explicitly for white children, but in many parts of the country, the outcome is still the same. As one of our speakers said on Wednesday, districts are the new segregation lines. According to a recent New York Times article, more than half of the nation's school children are in racially concentrated districts where over 75% of students are either white or non-white. And these school districts that predominantly serve students of color receive $23 billion less in funding than mostly white school districts in the United States, despite serving the same number of students. The Supreme Court made it clear in Brown that there is no way for separate to be equal. This is true now as ever. And these differences in funding translate to differences in education and outcomes. I learned this year in my work on school finance reform that reading by the end of third grade is a critical measure. In fourth grade, students go from what is called learning to read to reading to learn. They are no longer just reading books to get better at reading, now they are reading textbooks to learn content. A student who cannot read by the fourth grade starts to fall behind, and with each passing day, it becomes harder and harder to catch up. In HISD, only 1/3 of black fourth graders can read at grade level. Compare that with 3/4 of white students. Race is not the only way our schools are segregated. Race is intimately tied to economics, and the economic disparities are just as stark. According to the Houston Chronicle, HISD has a childhood poverty rate of 37%, and 76.4% of its students are considered economically disadvantaged, while in neighboring Katy ISD, there's a childhood poverty rate of only 8.4%, and only 28.3% of its students are economically disadvantaged. That's a nearly 30-point gap, well off the 7-point national average for neighboring districts. In an act of tragic irony, I was taught in my almost all-white school that Brown versus the Board of Education had ended racial segregation in America. And in an act of unfathomable privilege, I believed it. The story I was taught growing up was that the work of the 1950s and 60s had represented unreversible forward progress. The story I heard on Wednesday night was a story of racial integration that has been flawed from the start and subject to much backsliding. On Wednesday, Brown was celebrated, but it was also lamented. The segregation we see today is even more pernicious, even more intractable than that of the segregation before the Civil Rights Movement. What I hailed as a blessing had kept me from seeing a curse. Having seen and acknowledged this fact, I now have to cope with the world that is a lot more complex, which is, for lack of a better word, less black and white. This week's Torah portion, Bechukotai, is the last in the book of Leviticus. The book ends with a list of blessings and curses. If the Israelites follow God's laws, everything will be great. Their crops will grow, their families will flourish, they will vanquish their enemies. But if they fail to follow God's laws, everything will fall apart. They will be spurned by God, starved by famine, and scattered to the winds. To me, this is a theology that is almost foreign in its simplicity. Do good, all blessings. Do bad, terrible curses. But that's not how the world works. Progress and regress are not opposites but partners, and we can only hope to make more steps forward than back. Perhaps this is why the section on blessings and curses ends a bit muddled. After explaining how God will reject and exile the cursed people, the text goes on to say, "Yet even then, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not forget them or spurn them so as to destroy them, annulling my covenant with them. For I, the Eternal, am their God. I will remember in their favor the covenant with their ancestors." After setting up this strict dichotomy of blessings versus curses, suddenly the separation is not so clear. I will exile you, but I will not forsake you. I will spurn you, but I will not abandon you. This chapter reads like the story of our lives. We start out with a simplistic, naive understanding of the world, but as we grow and mature, we come to see and appreciate the complexity. Would that real life were as simple as blessings and curses. In truth, life is a mixture of cursed blessings and blessed curses. These past few months, our congregants joined with Reformed Jews from all over the state through the newly formed Religious Action Center of Texas in a campaign for school finance reform. And 1 week ago, the bill for which we advocated, HB 3, passed both the House and the Senate unanimously. It is a historic piece of legislation, the first time the state has seriously addressed the question of school finance reform in decades. The state's 5.4 million public school students will all feel the benefit of this investment of $6 billion new education dollars. The law will invest more state money in public schools, raise teacher and staff compensation, protect equity for low-income students, and provide funds for full-day pre-K. It is a major step forward. And our movement had a hand in making this happen. Congregants went to Austin to lobby, made calls to their senators and representatives, and had conversations with local school board members, education activists, parents, students, and teachers. Though we certainly cannot take all or most of the credit, we played a small part in this historic victory for Texas's children. But this victory is not all blessing. Like Brown versus the Board of Education, like all grown-up blessings, really, it contains curses too. This bill does not do enough to ensure funding in future budgets. It does not do enough to eliminate discrimination and segregation. And our state is $14 billion behind the national average in per-student spending. This influx of $6 billion does not get us even halfway to closing that gap. And that's halfway to the average in our country. It's going to take many more bills like this one until we can truly say we are investing in our students. We have done something amazing, and yet we have not done enough, not nearly enough. It is progress, but like all progress, it is imperfect. And maybe, ultimately, that is the message we need to take from the events of this week. From the passage of HB 3, from our reconsideration of Brown versus the Board of Education, even from our Torah portion. We need the ability to see the blessings in our curses and the curses in our blessings. When we delude ourselves into thinking that something can only be good or bad, we hold ourselves back. Brown versus the Board of Education was a landmark decision, but like all landmarks, it is best used to plot our path forward. To accept something as only a blessing or a curse is to see the story as finished, but the story is not finished. The last verses of the 26th chapter of Leviticus remind us of this fact. And yet, even then, I will not give up, says God. You may think that you are cursed, you may think that you are down and out, but I am not done with your story. The moment we can acknowledge that even a giant leap is not the end of the journey is the moment we open ourselves to the possibility of progress. We are not done, not nearly done, fighting for justice, fighting for equality, fighting for our children. Let us celebrate the progress we have made, and let us acknowledge our failures along the way so that we can move bravely forward. Shabbat Shalom. Our service continues this evening on page 282 for Aleinu L'Shabeach. We invite you please to rise as you are able.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'teit gedula le'yotzeh breshit, shelo asanu kigoye ha'aratzot, ve'lo samanu kamishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, ve'gor aleinu ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
As we prepare for Mourner's Kaddish, a poem called The Hammock by the poet Lee Young Lee. When I lay my head in my mother's lap, I think how day hides the stars, the way I lay hidden once, waiting inside my mother, singing to herself. And I remember how she carried me on her back between home and the kindergarten once each morning and once each afternoon. I don't know what my mother is thinking. When my son lays his head on my lap, I wonder, does his father's kisses keep his father's worries from becoming his? I think, dear God, and remember there are stars we haven't heard from yet. They are so far to arrive. Amen, I think, and I feel almost comforted. I have no idea what my child is thinking. Between two unknowns, I live my life. Between my mother's hopes, older than I am by coming before me, and my child's wishes, older than I am by outliving me. And what is it like? Is it a door and a goodbye on either side? A window and eternity on either side? Yes, and a little singing between two great rests. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, life and death. Our heart goes out in sympathy to the family of Suzanne Hauser, who was laid to rest this past week. Our community also recalls the yard sites of Eric Alexander, Shirley Alter, Jack Alter, J.D. Buddy Bacchus, Isidore Barron, Alfred Bierman, Hattie Benderoff, Alan Berg, Dorothy Berger, Harold Bergman, Marvin Berman, Tilly Bernstein, Sheldon Bernstein, Herman Birnbaum, Helen Blumberg, Edith Wilson Britton, Ida Brooks, Adele Siegel Buckman, Sydney Beyer, Frida R. Carr, Benjamin Choroser, Julius Kaminsky, Iser Kuhir, Rebecca David, Akiba Davis, Arlene Rogan Dennis, Adele Gardner Dawn, Rosalind Eisenstein, Max Epstein, Bernard Farfel, Benjamin Feld, David Feldman, Helen Feldman, Harry Fishbane, Samuel Edward Fox, Joe Frank, Pearl Freed, Charlie Friedman Friend, Nancy Wolochin Jensen, Reuben Gilden, Israel Leon Glassgold, Shirley Ruth Goldfarb, Shirley Beck Green, Bernice Greenblatt, Annette Bromberg Greenfeld, Ruth R. Grenader, Jack Samuel Helfman, Cecilia Herzog, Sadie Rose Bibi Hess, Charles Chuck Joe Hibbler, Maureen L. Howard, Dorothy Constance Janowitz, Morris Kagan, Harry Wolf Camion, Norman Kaplan, Leo S. Kaplan, Ruben Kaplinsky, Ida G. Cater, Bertha Weiss Kaufman, Elliot Krasnow, Rose Kropkopf, Roberta Leistein, Ben Lerner, Morris Lerner, Joseph J. Levin, Abraham Levine, Andrea Levine, Joseph Lozer Jr., Nathan L. Lohman, Abe Marks, Esther Molaski, Becky Meyer, Roger Milch, Gerald Morgenstern, Faye Nathanson, Jack Palmer, Helen Perlman, Leonard Pessis, Isidore Pivar, Grace Rose Reich, Gloria Robb, Fanny Robbins, Leon Robbins, Robert Rosenthal, Rebecca D. Rosenthal, Mildred Rudolph, Vera Fischel Rush, Bagador Sadikov, Nathan Salzberg, Meyer Saltzman, Leo Schlamy, Mabel Schwartzfeld, Aaron Siegel, Hyman E. Siegel, Joseph Selden, Luis Linda Seligman, Ray Scheinberg, Simon Silverblatt, Milton T. Silverman, John Sloan, Eugene Hugh Smith, Philip Solomon, Herman Thiemann, Pauline Tobias, John Vetta, Joseph S. Werlin, Florence Funny Weiss, Lee M. Wolchansky, and Sarah Zucker. If there are others that you're recalling on this Shabbat, or if I've misspoken any of the names on the list, I invite you please to share those names as my eyes meet yours. The words of Mourner's Kaddish are found on page 294. We rise together as one community. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma tivrach rutei v'almich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'gala v'zman kariv v'imru amen, yehei shmei Rabbah mivorach le'olam omea maya, Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Vitba'ar, Vitchomam, Vitnaseh, Vithadar, Vithale, Vithalal, Shmed Kudsha, Brichu, Le'ela Mimkol Birchata, Vashirata, Tushbachata, V'ne'emata, Ta'amiran Be'ama, V'imru, Amen, Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen, O say Shalom B'mromav, Huya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Say shalom b'mromav, huya aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. You may be seated as we invite up Serena and Trudy and their siblings, Melody and Dina and their cousins, to lead us in Kiddush and Motzi. What?
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'rata b'anu b'shabbat kosher b'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereshit ki hu yom tehillah l'mikrayei kodesh zecher l'yat Mitzrayim ki banu v'harta v'tanu kidashta li'omim v'shabbat kodshecha v'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu Baruch atah Adonai mechadesh haShabbat. Oh wow. Sorry. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Our closing song this evening is Lechi Lach on page 341.
To a land that I will show you. Lech lecha
To a place you do not know. Lechi Lach, on your journey I will bless you.
You shall be a
Blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechi Lach. Lechi Lach. And I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lechi Lach, to the place that I will show you. Simchat Chayim,
Lesimchat Chayim,
Simchat Chayim,
Lechi Lach. And
you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing.
you shall be a blessing.
Lechi Lach. Mekor HaBracha, source of our blessings, help us to acknowledge and embrace that there are curses even in our blessings, just as there are blessings even in our curses. Help us to find courage and strength to continue when the journey seems long and the road seems difficult. Help us notice the many gifts that exist in our lives. Help us to find peace on this and all Sabbaths. And we say together, Amen. Shabbat Shalom.